Kerri,
Yes.
we are here with Sussex Health and Environmental Network
Yes.
doing series on environmental justice. And one of the things that really moves people is the stories of communities that are so hard to get out in mainstream
Yes.
media for so many different reasons. I'm going to take you back because when I first met, this is Kerri Evelyn Harris. Kerri was running for against Tom Carter for senator.
Yes.
And everybody was like, who is this Kerri Evelyn Harris? Nobody ever heard of Kerri Evelyn Harris. And now, I don't think there's anybody in Delaware that doesn't know your name.
Probably.
But one of the things that connected us when I met you while you were running were the environmental justice issues.
Absolutely.
And the social justice issues, which are always
overlapping. Always.
But that was a big part of your campaign and your message. Why the justice issues?
Justice issues in general. I was born into it. My parents have always been fighters for justice. And so it was just a piece of who I am. My children will be that way. I know your child is that way, right? And so this is what family does. We help our family, and our family isn't just blood, it's our neighbors. And sometimes you don't realize it until you're in the thick of things and realize the interconnectedness of all issues. But I was lucky from a young age to learn that. And then environmental justice, my mom was always really big into it. Admittedly, I was like, okay, it's not as bad. And she used to always say, we only have a few more years. We have to plan. I remember this from a young age and planning to move north because of climate change and things. As I got older and information started to show that it was more imminent, I started to pay more attention. I knew it was something we had to pay attention to. And then meeting you really was a turning point where I started to truly realize how environmental justice touched every other justice piece, right? Economic justice, education justice, criminal justice, all of those things are touched by environmental justice. And it really was, so I was actually invited by another person saying, hey, there's this group meeting about water issues in Sussex, do you want to go? And I said yes. And at that meeting, I was blown away. It's the first time I heard Dr. Scobie Wilson speak, the first time you and I met. And I remember at the end coming up, I don't even think I introduced myself as running for office at the time. I don't remember. But it was just like, what do I need to do? What do I need to know? And ever since then, you have shown me what is happening here. And I've been absolutely blown away by how poorly our state has treated people, and also blown away by the number of just warriors who are fighting this hard fight to make sure other people aren't dying from environmental justice issues.
Right. And it's something that you said, when we're talking about communities that we call environmental justice issues and communities, these are the front line, the fence line, communities that are overburdened with pollution. When we think about, our families, where we live, where we work, where we pray, where we play, where we are.
Exactly.
And they have so many exposures from usually not even one source of pollution, but many, many sources. And it affects every area of the life. Now, I know you met folks like Gina,
yes,
when this was all happening during the Mount Air, where everyone's wells, it was discovered that so many people had water that was undrinkable. Their nitrates were over the limit, over 10 milligrams per liter. There were air quality issues, and a lot of, you met personally, a lot of the folks. Actually, I think Gina, her sister, probably everybody along Harbor Lane, the folks in Possum Point that were already dealing with it. folks in Milton that are dealing with the harvesting the Allen Harim wastewater being brought up. It was when this got like brought out into the public, all of a sudden everybody was doing the nitrate test that they offer here. Thank God they do this in Delaware, but there's $4 tests that you can test your well water for nitrates, bacteria, and folks started doing it, and it was alarming because there were people that were finding out their nitrates. I remember one woman, I think her nitrates were, I think 90, and she had a couple kids in her house. And the whole thing with nitrates is it doesn't make your water a different color. It doesn't smell funny. There's no way of knowing unless you actually are doing the sampling. So we had the Milton area folks. Now we're dealing with Seaford, with the communities there, with the factory farm gas. You know, it's just never ending. These communities are assaulted over and over again. When you met, a lot of them were silenced.
Yes.
You had brought in, the Young Turks had come in to do a story, and the story hit Sussex County in a big way. And after that, I can remember calling you one day because I was sent a notice that Mount Air had filed a motion for a gag order.
Yes.
Not only against the residents that were involved in the contamination issues and were taking legal action, but against people like you.
Yes.
I think you're in Exhibit A. Here was the article was top Trump donor poisons rural Delaware.
Yes.
And I think they did not like that going.
They did not.
Public. Yeah. So yeah, you were in interview with Kerri, Evelyn Harris. I think in Exhibit A. I think socially responsible agriculture project. They went after me in Exhibit B, and then they did the articles. All the media. Progressive group accuses Mount Air of poisoning rural Delaware. Points to Trump ties. The one picture of the waste, the solid waste coming out of the end caps, which was just totally untreated waste.
Yeah.
And this was being applied onto these people
Yes.
that were suffering. So when you started hearing the communities and the problems, bring me back to like what you were hearing, what you thought, what you felt, what that.
Yeah.
It was personal.
It's what was personal about it is I've been in places and times in my life where people didn't hear, they didn't listen. Because I ran for U.S. Senate, a whole network was opened up to me. And the only reason that happened was because we built the largest volunteer team that ever existed in our state, because people believed in what we were trying to do. And I firmly believed, even though we lost that race, we won big in Delaware. It changed the landscape of politics, and it allowed me to have a network that I felt mandated to leverage for people. And so when you came and you introduced me to Gina and her family, and I learned about the death and the miscarriages and the medical conditions, it was clear that I had to make sure their voices were heard. And I remember it was pretty quick, like, hey, why don't we just call and get TYT in and see if they'll do a story. And as quickly as I sent out the request, they were ready to set up and come in, right? And it was telling about the power we have if we work together, right? None of us are rich people, but we're rich in resources as far as building relationships that are truly valuable and learning how to leverage what we've collected over our time to share with others, right? And I think that's what we need to learn from this is even though environmental justice and other justice work is generally aimed at communities of color and low wealth communities regardless of race, we have more power than we think if we work collectively. They can't shut us down, they can't silence us, and that's their fear. Right. If there's nothing that can stop us, right? My advantage, and sometimes disadvantage because it's hard being broke, is that I don't take money from people. So you can't scare me saying, well, I'm going to make sure that donor doesn't give you money, right? And so that scares industry. You're the same type of person. You're like, well, if you take it, I'm still going to do the work, right? And so I firmly believe that gag order had nothing to do with what we said, because the truth is what we said was basic information, right? It's the fact that they knew that there was nothing else that could stop us except for a court order that mandated us to be quiet. And that's a big deal. And I think there are a lot more people out there ready to do this. They just need to see that they're not alone in the willingness to just truly fight for their community.
Right. And that's something that we always talked about. If people could see, like, these kind of things,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
where this big, billions and billions of dollars is trying to silence folks that are trying to help their neighbors in their communities. It's beyond appalling.
Yes.
The way that, like, you'll hear me say a lot, company town. I compare it to a company town because of the control and the power that they do have.
Yes.
Why do they have this kind of power with legislators? With media, with folks that often, even, you go up into some cases, you see the courts are impacted.
Absolutely.
By it. I mean, why do we run into this?
My father always has a saying, remember that to most people the true God is green, right? And
say it again.
The true God is green, meaning money runs things, and especially here in America, it's about money. Our elections, you need money to run, and there was because of it, you go to the donors that will bring the money, and even the best intentioned elected officials often find themselves scouting money, and so you look for the ways to try to do good, but then at the same time not to push your big donors to the side. And the problem with that is historically you had more room for error, but this idea, this cumulative impact, the fact that if you do it over and over and over again, eventually there's little to no room for error. And that's where we've come to when it comes to toxins in our water, toxins in our air, in our homes. You can't keep kicking the can down the road, right? And so we have to realize that so long as we let the power of the dollar be more powerful than the human spirit, more powerful than human life, we are going to continuously see ourselves fail. And so, and the truth is, it's not just elected officials, it's community members. I've spoken to community members down here, and they'll say, yeah, we do need to do some of these things for our community, but the poultry industry pays for our little league. But they know other kids are also drinking contaminated water. It's that little bit of money that can make folks pull away, and the industries know that. And these company towns historically have been named job creators, job innovators, and in reality, it's modern day slavery. It's forcing you to work in a certain industry because that's all that's there. You go to the stores, and that's what is owned. That is also owned by these industries or the people, the cronies of, right? I was canvassing in Milford at one point during the campaign, and a lot of people there don't work at poultry industry. They work for a seafood industry plant. And there were a lot of injustices happening there, and they were worried that they couldn't say anything because a lot of the people on the city council also worked for the factory. So they're like, our hands are tied. How can we call out these issues happening in our workplace if the very people we're supposed to call for support are also management in these factories? There's this close tie. Company towns are real. They're happening all over the United States, but most especially in Kent and Sussex County.
Yeah. And Sussex, so for those listening that may be outside of Sussex or maybe within Sussex or the Delmarva region, Delmarva is a big region, obviously, for the poultry industry. It has been for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. Sussex County is the #1 producing broiler county in the entire nation. Okay, so we have a lot of processing plants, a lot of air pollution, a lot of mega factory farms. We have a lot going on, and we're talking about cumulative impacts, right? So, this is something, and there's actually legislation that's being worked on now, which I'm so grateful, because this is never looked at when you take things in front of an agency. They look at just that plat of land, right? They don't say, okay, wait a minute, around this community, within 2 miles, these folks have a power plant, they have an asphalt plant, they have 2 processing plants, they have a Superfund site, which is a contaminated site, brownfield site's a contaminated site. It's multiple forms of pollution from everywhere that they're overburdened when we're talking about front line and fence line. And one of the things, when we talk about control, we talk about power, even to, and this is not unique to Delaware, it's in all the states that are ag states that I've had experience with communities, is that agencies which are deemed to protect public health to do, it is such a political football that they don't call us about it, right? Because we can't tread there. And another example that comes to mind with this is when they wanted to put a slaughter plant out on Harim in Possum Point, and an old Vlasic pickle seasonal operation. The community there had called on the public health agency, do a meeting, we're concerned. Wouldn't even get return calls, I mean, that's the level of please don't call us, right? So there was a Dr. Jacoby Wilson, who is an environmental researcher, scientist at the University of Maryland School of Public Health in College Park. Anyway, when the community needed to do a health impact assessment, and the University of Maryland did an exceptional research on what was already overburdened in the community and what this would do. It's called a rapid health impact assessment, which is published. It's a peer-reviewed, published research project now in journals. And on something called a PIA request, which is when you request documents from agencies, someone had sent me documents that came up from the industry, where the industry, it was actually Bill Satterfield with Delmarva Poultry Industry, which is a trade group for industry, to promote industry.
Yes.
Where they were writing to the dean, various officials, about why there was, in quotes, a study being done against the Delaware poultry industry, which to me firstly appalled me, because this is public health research. It's not a study, in quotes. this is valuable information that decision makers should be looking at prior to, and especially because of the lack of public health information that the community was trying to reach for. This should be available, right, to the community when a big project is coming in, especially to an area that's already overburdened, already environmental justice community. So it was basically a threatening letter to intimidate science, intimidate Dr. Wilson's very credible research. He's probably the leading environmental justice expert along the East Coast.
Yes.
And I sent it to him. I was appalled. I said, do you see what's happening here? And I mean, clearly, the letter that they sent out, you know, as stated, DPI values its relationship with the University of Maryland and hopes to be in a position to continue in other words,
it's leveraging the money.
Right. And that is beyond appalling.
Economic slavery.
Right. I don't think the general public realizes that these kind of letters are being sent to credible researchers when public health research and science is just as important as ag science.
Absolutely.
And this is one of those things that, you know, your eyes pop out and mine shouldn't pop out anymore.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah.
So that type of influence and that type of the control of the politicians, the lobbying, the influence on agencies that are designed to do a function, which is, you know, protecting public health, protecting environment, and all of this gets influenced the whole way down. Even the media, because of advertising.
Absolutely.
Like what you just said, general people in the public.
Yep.
Talking about, you know, our baseball team, our sports team,
yes.
And really, the community wants them to be good neighbors.
Exactly.
They want them to abide by. They're not asking for extras. They're saying, work within your permits.
Exactly, and not just that. It's the big counter argument also is we're job destroyers, that we're trying to take away people's right to choose whether they're vegetarians or not. To set the record straight, I'm not trying to give up eating chicken tomorrow, right? But I would like my chicken to be raised in a way that's healthy so they don't have extra stress hormones. I would like to make sure that the communities that are raising these chickens are not dying just to make sure I have some chicken on my table. And they'll give the argument, well, you know, if we cut back, then there's not going to be any chicken. That's not true, because hundreds of thousands of chickens die every year because of mistreatment before they ever are even close to reaching our dining room tables, right? And so in reality, this is probably more fiscally responsible for the farmers, for our community, to actually raise poultry in a humane way, and also make sure our farmers are taken care of and the surrounding communities. And so to me, it's common sense. To me, it's good policy. To me, it's being very neighborly. And in reality, it's a good business stance, right? If the community sees the poultry industry taking the steps to modernize in a way that actually puts people first, they will start to create more loyalty from their customers, right? Customers will choose the organization, the industry, the business that takes care of them. Right. And it's just a choice. And whoever does it first is going to be the one that sustains going into the future.
And industry knows this. Like I was just reading this letter. The trade group for the industry used to be called the Delaware poultry industry. They they have a Facebook page from from different people inside, growers, various. It used to be called Delaware Poultry Uncensored. I don't know if they changed the name now, but it was a good, the bad, the ugly about.
Yeah.
Right. And there was discussion because the name was changed from Delmarva Poultry Industry, the trade group, till now it's Delmarva Chicken Association, which makes it sound like a homeowners association.
Absolutely.
Less. So the public perception is, the PR is very important to them, and they're worried about image and what's projected. But I can remember this was all going on during COVID, and it was at a time where growers, you know, they were having houses depopulated because of the bottleneck, the supply chain, various things. And here was, I think it was one of the growers had put up a post, something about, I think it was like $40,000 they used to come up with a name that was, and this was at a time when they get paid by live weight. So they were not getting income if houses were being depopulated.
Right.
It just never ceases to amaze me that they think the public is maybe that naive, because I don't think the public's that naive anymore. I think there's been too much activism, too much people speaking out, farmers speaking out, communities speaking out, to where it's not a secret anymore. But they're very aware of the image and protecting that image.
They are, and they're the way you said, $40,000 to change a name. That is calculated. They know how the community will react. They do testing, message testing, right? We that are dedicated and centered on the people and the community need to be more aware of how we're using language, and make it so it's very understandable to folks. Stay away from our jargon that we're used to saying, so that people understand exactly what we're talking about, because everybody specializes, right? So if I don't care if you're speaking to a member of the military, if you're talking to a truck driver, they're all going to use words that the rest of us who are not in their business, we're not ready to pick up on. And we need to understand that as folks who are working for the community, as organizers, that the industry is constantly working against us. Just the way they said a progressive group. I mean, you could title us that, or you could, the truth is that we're a community group.
Right. We're somebody that cares about our neighbors, right? We have concerns when there's birth defects at an alarming rate. Right.
But they know that the term progressive is going to trigger people.
Right.
Well, in EJ, we don't have room for politics.
No.
Everybody is touched. You can't build a wall deep, high enough. You can't dig a well deep enough, right? That is going to keep the air pollution out, the water pollution out. It's going to keep the pollution out of our walls. We are all surrounded by it. So regardless of your political affiliation, your race, your income, your geography, we are all touched by this. And so this is, any group that is working on environmental justice is not progressive or far right. They're a community group. And we have to understand that the community is affected. The community needs to work together to create the change that is going to be necessary for us all to survive, and our future generations to not have to be in a place where they're constantly fighting for basic resources.
Right. And then, you know, I go back to, I get excited when we talk about community and community organizing. There was, you probably know, the late Senator Paul Wellstone. I watch this probably a couple times a year. He did a YouTube video on grassroots organizing, and one of the things that sticks with me, and I remind myself all the time, is we all do better when we all do better, right? And that's what communities are asking for.
Yes.
It's that simple. It's that simple.
Exactly.
You know, we deserve clean air. We deserve clean water. We deserve for our children to be able to be educated to the best of their God-given talents and abilities, not to a point where their even ability to be educated is stifled by exposure pollution.
Exactly.
That is the unforgivable sin
It is.
to me. And to hear a mother cry because her child wanted to be so many different things, but couldn't because couldn't be educated. Have that conversation. That's a tough conversation. Yes. How do you justify that? You can't.
Yep.
You were telling me a story, because this is how it happens, about a woman that you met.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't want to give her story completely away. I don't know that she wants to go public, but I'll give an overview without specifics, which is to say, there's a location in Dover that is being just completely crushed by exposure issues, exposure toxins. Large portions are dying of cancer. Large portions of that community are developing neurological diseases. And one, they're being told, well, it's genetics. Well, most of those people aren't even genetically related. And then two, if people are putting together that it's not genetics, they're being told, well, there's nothing that's connecting it. Well, it has to be. There is no way that a small community all are developing the same types of issues. Even if you're from the same family. If you and I were blood relatives and you got a certain form of cancer, it's not a very high likelihood that I would. Maybe my children would, right? It's just, it doesn't work that way, right? And so when people, when industry, when community leaders try to tell people, well, it's natural, this is what happens, we need to start paying attention. We have to fight back.
Right.
And unfortunately, this same community, this same member that identified this to me, is in the same position that a lot of us are, overworked, underpaid, and so no time to fight back. And she wants to.
Right.
When I told her some of the things I had heard, she wanted to be more involved, but her schedule doesn't allow it to happen.
Right. We talked about influence. Mm-hmm. What we're starting to see, another form of influence is, we talked about industry with money. Industry also funds what they call big green sometimes.
Yeah. And
there was just an article that came out, which actually is kind of like an independent startup of a media, because the real news doesn't get out.
Yes.
Which I got to give a shout out. I just subscribed because I just found out about it. Something called
Delaware Call.
Delaware Independent. Yeah. And one of the things we've been really the community has been battling back with hundreds and hundreds of comments of opposition is what industry is basically trying to sell as green solution, I'm going to use the quotes, for the poultry waste, which from the entire Delmarva region. Now, anybody that knows about Delaware knows 90% of our waterways are contaminated, and the largest contributor is agriculture.
Yeah.
So to be selling as a solution, and especially to fence line communities, the way it was represented when it's being brought into a community that under the EJ screening tool are environmental justice communities. Mm-hmm. Mobile home park within a mile, largely Hispanic. A trailer park, a little over a mile, probably closer to 2, highly black community, median income town. And we have green groups that have been given money donated from the industry out there sending letters of support.
Yeah.
Which, I go back and I think, how many letters of support have I seen where they become, secretary's orders for contamination?
Yes.
And it's like, again, it is hard for people to try to maneuver when we have people that are supposed to be on the side of the environment, and especially acknowledging environmental justice. It's just, to to me, I have a hard time dealing with the truth being suppressed.
Yes.
I'm someone that believes if you believe it's a solution, we should have environmental assessments.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be waiving traffic studies at environmental assess and not going by state code and saying, oh, it's all going to be okay. Just trust us. This is going to be good for us. How do we change it? How do we move forward and be effective in addressing the concerns of environmental justice, frontline, fence line communities in the state of Delaware? This has all been highlighted during COVID.
Absolutely.
How do we do it?
Couple ways. I think the start is to start chipping away at this idea that has been embedded in our minds that we can't do it, that there's not enough influence that we have within ourselves or our community. We are powerful beyond belief as individuals and even more so as communities. I want to highlight the idea that major change only takes 10%, right? The civil rights movement, which everybody lauds as like this major move in the U.S. for social justice, only 8% of Black people even supported it.
Really?
That's Black people, right? Yes. So what I'm trying to say is, don't think that you need large numbers to make change. Statistics teach us you only need 10% of the population to figure out what the whole rest of the population wants to do, right?
Say that number again. It only takes how many percent to make change? 10%. That takes what people think in their mind as doable.
Exactly.
Being out of reach and brings it.
Exactly. If people see 10% of those that are around them doing something, they'll want to participate, or they'll stand back and say, you know what, I'm not going to stop it, or they might quietly vote in the same way. You just need to make sure the messaging is out there, that the messaging is true. People can usually weed through nonsense, but you have to be willing to put in that work. So don't think that you're not going to be effective. You don't need a lot. The other thing to know is it's not scary to educate yourself. There's a lot of information out there. In Delaware, you know, you can definitely reach out to me. You can reach out to you, right? And we'll connect you with the right folks that can give you the information. If reading's not your thing, we can give you a killer conversation, right? Just educate yourself so that you can then educate folks in your immediate circle. When you're ready, help write op-eds. If you're not a good writer, somebody can ghostwrite. Just tell them your story and they'll put it into words. You can participate on panels. You can go to protests. You can help lobby. Call your senator. Call your representative. There's tons of things you can do. But at the very least, I will have to ask you, again, start chipping away at this belief that you're not good enough or that you can't contribute. And then the second piece is to educate yourself. Because the more educated you are, that will trickle off onto other people. And eventually you'll get angry enough and you'll start fighting back.
Right. And I think, like you talked about, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the conversation. When you said you were running, we said hardly anybody knew your name. Now everybody knows your name. And we talked about how this conversation and progressive leaders, if they want to put them in boxes or whatever they want to, the idea that community actually cares about people.
Yes.
I don't like labels because I think they're used to divide.
Absolutely.
Rather than, I want to say that the people that are fighting, believing that we actually have a voice in what goes on in our community and in politics and in electing folks to make sure that our voices are represented.
Absolutely.
Industry has plenty of lobbyists. They don't need any more. We need, that representation.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
We all do better when we all do better.
We all do better when we all do better.
There you go.